Prashur is my father-in-law. He's here tonight with us from Hilchos. So yesterday we spoke about a very interesting topic. We spoke about throwing your nails on the floor when you cut an Erev Shabbos. What's the problem with throwing your nails on the floor? Why are women punished by miscarrying when they step on those nails? And what you should do with them. We finished with a question last night about B'mem Adlikin. Why do we say B'mem Adlikin on Friday night? There are 24 prokim in the Masechta Shabbos. If you want to choose a parak, why don't you choose the first or maybe the smallest? Why do we choose the second parak B'mem Adlikin? Anybody know? Why do we choose B'mem Adlikin? Why do we say B'mem Adlikin on Friday night?
I can tell you why they wouldn't choose the shortest.
Which one?
I can tell you why they wouldn't choose the shortest.
Why not?
Because it wasn't the original takana, so people catch up. So they don't have to go...
The original Takana Madlikin was people should be able to catch up.
Right, so the people don't have to go home. If that's the case, then you don't want to catch up.
So you might want to choose the longest or something longer. Okay. So really the reason why we say Madlikin, the Shabura brings, it could be that's another reason we say Navi. The Shabura brings, the reason why I say Madlikin is because at the end of a Madlikin there's a mission that says that 3 things that a person has to say in his house in Erev Shabbos. A sartem, a raftem, and adlikus haner. So, I guess they used to be Mekabel Shabbos early all the time, and when they would say that mission at least, they would remind themselves that they have to do either Nafresh Meiser, or Bimad Ner, or a Ruvet Tchumen, a Ruvet Tafshilin, whatever they still have to do.
It's Al-Gemar.
What?
It's Al-Gemar.
It's Ar-Gemara, right. Right, Gimel Devarim, right, Ar-Gemara and Gittin says 3 things you have to say. Nechusa, wow. Good one, thanks you. Okay.
So how did the minhag start? People saying after Shemona Esrei, because that already, I mean, even if after Kabbalah Shabbos, you've already been Kabbalah Shabbos.
Right, that's an interesting question. I actually never saw the minhag to say it after Shemona Esrei until recently. But apparently there is such a minhag. I don't know why people say that.
Even after Kabbalah Shabbos, you've already been Kabbalah Shabbos. It'd be too late. You're saying the reason is to remind yourself to count.
Right, and we say that after Mizmor Shir. Right, but really, and it wasn't always that we were Mekabel Shabbos with Mizmor Shir. The Mechaber brings in the end of Reish Samach Gimel, all the way at the end. That really Kabbalah Shabbos happens with Baruch Hu. End of Reish Samach Aleph, I'm sorry. With Baruch Hu. Only recently have we started being Mekabel Shabbos with Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbos. So at the time that the Kana was actually enacted by Chazal, it could very well be that the Kabbalah Shabbos was with Baruch Hu and you said B'mem Adlikin before Baruch Hu. And apparently you said B'mem Adlikin before Shkia, and because you said before Shkia, you had time to remember these 3 things that it says in that parak in the last Mishnah. Okay. That is Reish Samach. Let's move on to Reish. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention Adlikus Haner, right? B'mad is very interesting. Mishnah Berurah says that all other things in the Mishnah mentions B'losh Shayla. A raftem, a sartem, right? You ask your wife, did you remember to be mafresh challah when you baked challah? Did you remember to do a ruvet tafshilin? But adlikos haner is just a statement. Adlikos haner is basically you're telling her to be madlik the ner. And the reason for that is it's not b'losh shayla because you could see for yourself. You look in your house and you see. Is the ner doluk? But afrosh challah or meiser you can't necessarily see and therefore you have to ask. And that's why the lashon of the Mishnah is adlikos haner more b'losh and tzivui in telling her. And the Shabur brings that very interesting that if your wife isn't on time, then you should light the candles instead, in a sensitive way, and explain to her that the candles have to be lit for Shabbos, and we don't want to do Mechal Shabbos, and the man is also mitzvah and adlakas neiros, and he could also light candles, and therefore if he sees that it's right before Shkia, and she hasn't lit, then he should light it himself. Okay, so now we're going to start Reish Samach Aleph, just the beginning of Reish Samach Aleph. Reish Samach Aleph is a very big semen in terms of quality with Ben Hashmoshes. What is mutter to do Ben Hashmoshes and what is usher to do Ben Hashmoshes? Now, what is Ben Hashmoshes? Ben Hashmoshes is from Shkia 13 and a half minutes into Shkia. If Shkia is, let's say, what time is Shkia these days? 4 o'clock, 4 something? 3:50?
350.
3:50. So it's, let's say it's 3:50, Shkia is 3:50, so 4:03 and a half, that's Bein Hashmoshes. It's Suffolk Yom, Suffolk Laila. We're not sure whether it's Yom or Laila, and therefore we have to be Machmer, be Mekabel Shabbos for sure, a little bit before Shkia. Now, that time, those 13 and a half minutes, what are you allowed to do, what are you not allowed to do? So the Pashtas, you're not allowed to do anything. It's Shabbos, you have to treat it like Shabbos. So surprisingly, there are some things that you're allowed to do, Bein Hashmoshes, and we'll learn about it. The Mechaber begins, first of all, you're allowed to be Meiser, you're allowed to do Meiser on Demai. Demai is, if you buy something from Anam Aretz, you're not sure if you took off Meiser from it, you're allowed to give Meiser. But Meiser Vadai, that you're not allowed to do. If, let's say, you know for sure something wasn't given Meiser from, you're not allowed to give Meiser Ben Hashmoshes. Why not? What's the Isra of giving Meiser? Makav Patish, almost. What's the Isra of being Mafresh Chala Ben Hashmoshes? Why you're not allowed to be Mafresh Chala on Shabbos? Taken. Because you're being mistaken something. Same thing almost. Being mistaken something. So it's Isra D'Rabbanan. It's Isra D'Rabbanan to be Mafresh Chala. So by D'mai, because there's a 90% chance that Amoritz was already Mafresh Chala, that's why you're allowed to by D'mai. Because it's only a 90%, it's only a 10% chance that perhaps it wasn't taken Meiser from. The Amoritz didn't take Meiser from it. How is it relevant to nowadays? Nowadays we don't really have Meiser, especially in Chutz La'aretz we don't give Meiser. So what's irrelevant to us, this halacha? It's very relevant by Afroshes Chala. If you bake Chala, you have to give Chala. So you remember Ben Hashmoshes, you weren't Mafresh Chala yet. Are you allowed to be Mafresh Chala? Ben Hashmoshes. So the halacha is that L'tzorich Mitzvah, any D'Rabbanan, you're allowed to be over L'tzorich Mitzvah. So L'tzorich Mitzvah, because you're not going to have Chala, you're not going to have Chala for Shabbos if you're not Mafresh Chala. So L'tzorich Mitzvah, you're allowed to be Mafresh Chala Ben Hashmoshes. Any D'Rabbanan, you're allowed to be over Ben Hashmoshes, L'tzorich Mitzvah. So Hafroshes Chala should be included in that, because Hafroshes Chala nowadays, b'chutz la'aretz is only a D'Rabbanan. So you're being Mafresh Chala until you kimesak, and it looks like you're correcting something, and that's only Isser D'Rabbanan. And therefore, you would be allowed to be Mafresh Chala in chutz la'aretz nowadays. But the Mishnah Berurah says that Hafroshes Chala in chutz la'aretz is also usher, despite the fact that usually an Isser D'Rabbanan is mutter ben Hashmoshes l'tzorich mitzvah, but Hafroshes Chala is different. Why? Because Hafroshes Chala is a special halacha in chutz la'aretz that one doesn't have to be Mafresh Chala in order to eat it. He could just leave over a piece at the end and say afterwards that that's going to be the piece. L'mafreya, retroactively, that would be the piece that he initially wanted to be Chala. So therefore, that's what you should do.
Brera.
Or because of Brera. There's two reasons. The other reason is because of Brera. Right? Because by the Rabbanan we say Brera. The only time you can't actually do it is if, let's say, Erev Shabbos is Erev Pesach. If Shabbos falls at an Erev Pesach, then you can't do that Eitzah. Why? Because you can't leave over a piece of challah. Right? Because right after Shabbos is already Pesach, so you can't leave over a piece of challah. So then, that's the only time you're actually allowed to be Mafresh Chala Ben Hashmoshes. But otherwise, you shouldn't be Mafresh Chala Ben Hashmoshes. That's the first halacha. The other one is Ve'im Mad Bilam Esakelim. You're not allowed to toivel. You're not allowed to toivel kelim. You're not allowed to be mesaken kelim. Since kelim are osur, unless you toivel them, so you're not allowed to be toivel kelim because then you're making them ready to use. It looks like you're being mesaken something. Again, l'tzorich mitzvah. If you have nothing else, l'tzorich mitzvah is mutter. Ein madlikin asaneres. You're not allowed to light candles. Of course not. That's a deraisa. It's a suffix deraisa. Ve'ein ma'arven eruvet tchumen. You're not allowed to do eruvet tchumen. But ma'asrin.
Is that a suffix deraisa?
Madlikin asaneres. Oh, you're saying it's a deraisa. It's a real deraisa because ben hashmoshes. No, so ben hashmoshes is only a suffix. Suffix comes in the glailas. So I'm saying that's already a suffix. You're getting involved in a malacha deraisa in a time of a suffix. So that's why it's suffix deraisa. Then you have ma'asrin admai. The Gemchaber says you're allowed to give ma'aser from demai. The time in the Sachamin, you're allowed to do atmana. We spoke about atmana the other week. Atmana you're allowed to do on ben hashmoshes. Again, we're dealing with atmana with dover she'ein avos hevel. Just wrapping up your pot, your soup pot. You want to keep it warm for the suda. Wrapping it up in towels. So even though you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos, but ben hashmoshes, those 13 minutes, you're still allowed to do that. Why? Because the whole isser of atmana is we're afraid you're going to see that the pot is cold and you're going to put it onto the stove and touch the flame. But usually, ben hashmoshes, the pot is still hot. So we're not afraid for that. That's the Gemara says. And therefore, ben hashmoshes, you're allowed to still wrap your pot in towels, even if you didn't do it before Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos, but ben hashmoshes, you're allowed to do it. What about Amir La'akum? This is really relevant. Amir La'akum ben hashmoshes. What's the halacha Amir La'akum ben hashmoshes? You see your light is on in the bedroom or it's off in the dining room, and you need to tell a guy to put on or turn off your light. Are you allowed to do that ben hashmoshes? So we know if you're Makabel Shabbos early, we know you're allowed to tell a Yid, even another Yid that wasn't Makabel Shabbos, you're allowed to tell him to do malacha for you. And Kolshkin, you're allowed to tell a guy. Well, what about ben hashmoshes? Ben hashmoshes, everybody was Makabel Shabbos already. Ben hashmoshes. Are you allowed to tell a guy, do we treat it like Shabbos or not? So, according to what we just said, Isser d'Rabbanan l'tzoyrech mitzvah, right? Amir La'akum is only a Shavuos, it's only Isser d'Rabbanan. L'tzoyrech mitzvah, you're allowed to go and tell a guy ben hashmoshes, even after Shkia, as long as you're within those 13 minutes. You're allowed to tell a guy ben hashmoshes to do malacha for you, to turn on a light. Now, it's very interesting. The Mishnah Berurah, in a later place, in Siman Reish Samach Gimel, speaks about a woman that forgot to light candles before Shkia. Could she tell a guy to light candles for her during Ben Hashmoshes, those 13 minutes? So Mishnah Berurah says, yes, that's l'tzarech mitzvah. Isur d'Rabbanan, Amir La'akum is only Isur d'Rabbanan. L'tzarech mitzvah, she's allowed to tell a guy to light candles for her. What about a bracha? Does she make a bracha when the guy lights the candles for her? Because the nusach bracha is lahadlik. She's not being madlik those candles. And not only that, even if you'll say that perhaps the guy is a shliach, is her shliach, but we know ain't shlichus la'akum, a guy can't be a shliach either. So what does she do with regards to a bracha when a guy lights candles for her? So the Mishnah Berurah brings a machlokes hapaiskim. The Har Tzvi Pesach Frank has a very interesting tshuva about this. It's kedai, if you ever want to learn something geschmack, something aside of Gittin and what we're doing, it's kedai to look up the tshuva in Har Tzvi. Har Tzvi has a fantastic tshuva about a guy making a woman making a bracha when a guy lights the candles for her. And he says, although you're making lahadlik, and she's not being madlik, so how can make the nusach bracha is lahadlik, right? And the guy can't be a shliach. So he wants to say that the mitzvah of lighting candles on a woman, we'll speak about that in a later time in Siman Reish Samach Gimel, we'll just mention it shortly, that the mitzvah of lighting candles isn't that she should do a maisa hadlaka, the act of lighting the candles, as long as through her she was somehow the goyrim in these candles being lit, she can make a lahadlik. The lahadlik doesn't necessarily have to mean that she's doing the actual act of lighting the candles, as long as because of her these candles are lit, she can make a lahadlik, and that's considered that she's being madlikit, because we're not so much concerned that she should do it, rather the candles should be lit. But the candles should be lit through her doing something. It doesn't have to be the actual lighting of the candles, and therefore she can make a bracha of lahadlik. That's concerning Amir La'akum ben hashmoshes. The Bir Halacha brings about a yahrzeit candle. Some people, is that considered l'tzarech mitzvah? And we spoke about just now regular candles for Shabbos. What about a yahrzeit candle? Someone remembers that they didn't light a yahrzeit candle yet. What could you tell a guy to light a yahrzeit candle? Is that considered l'tzarech mitzvah? What do you think? It should not be l'tzarech mitzvah, right? But the Bir Halacha says, he says because people accepted this minhag very strongly, accepted upon themselves this minhag very strongly. So it says even the yahrzeit candle is nichlal in l'tzarech mitzvah, and you could ask a guy to light ben hashmoshes a yahrzeit candle. Yeah. Just finish off with one interesting tshuva Shalom Meshav I saw today. He says that in the Mishkan, what was havara? What was lighting used for? What did they light? Why did they light a fire in the Mishkan? We know everything on Shabbos is only also because that's what they did in the Mishkan. Which act, which role did the fire play in the Mishkan? They lit candles in the Mishkan.
Menorah.
What?
Menorah.
The menorah.
It's
Also the
Karbonos and Mizbeach.
the heating the floor. You know when
The
they used to
Ketairos.
when they used to heat their
Isn't
feet.
it the building?
Yeah,
What's it called? The fires where they used to heat their feet because they were walking there.
The fire was
What they called again the four.
because what
They
the
used to
floor
heat
was
their feet. Yeah.
the floor was very cold. It was
Yeah.
tiles.
Isn't it about the construction?
Huh?
Isn't it all on the Machas from the construction of the Mishkan? That's the
The construction of the Mishkan.
Well, the
Right.
one.
So then you couldn't take all these things into
In the construction,
into
you melt
consideration.
metal and
Yeah.
stuff. So, you know.
So where did they so the Poskim say, this is the Poskim say, the Poskim say that the Havara of the Mishkan was when they cooked the Salamanim for the Ketairos. That's where Havara was. And we know that a malacha is defined in Hilchos Shabbos. The definition of a malacha is only in as much as you're copying whatever they did in the Mishkan. For example, right? In the Mishkan they used Havara, light, in order to cook the Salamanim. So the Shaila Meshiv says that if you light a yahrzeit candle, what are you using the light for? You're not using the light to cook. So, with regards to Hilchos Shabbos, that's considered a malacha she'ein tzricha lagufa. You don't want the havara, the lighting of the candles, you're not using the way it was being used in the Mishkan. And that's how a malacha is defined. A malacha is defined in Hilchos Shabbos only by the way they used that malacha in the Mishkan. If you use it any other way, that's considered malacha she'ein tzricha lagufa, it's only the Rabbana.
Is it not a low plug though?
Sorry?
Is it not a low plug? So once you've made it also then.
Well, but we find the concept of malacha she'ein tzricha lagufa. I mean, why is there ever a concept of malacha she'ein tzricha lagufa? For example, the Gemara says, let's say someone is dragging a bench, right? And he's making a charitz. He's digging something, he's pulling it and he's digging something. So that's not chayrish. You're not even on the malach of chayrish. Why? Because your kavanah, your intentions aren't to use it as charisha. Your intentions are just to drag a bench. That's not Hashem Kavan actually. But let's say a person just wants to offer. That's malach she'ein tzricha lagufa. So we find malach she'ein tzricha lagufa. There's no light plug. So the Shaila Meshiv says that l'chayra this should be a malach she'ein tzricha lagufa, and it's a shvus de shvus. That means it's a mirula akom, which is the Rabbanim, on another Rabbanim, malach she'ein tzricha lagufa. So therefore, he wants to say that the yahrzeit candle, anyways, isn't a malacha deraisa. Isn't the question of malacha deraisa. Anyways, the shvus, which is more lenient. Okay, I just want to mention, we're going to Be'ezer Hashem begin Daf Zayin Amud Beis, offer Chutz La'aretz. So if everybody could just move over to Daf Zayin Amud Beis, that would be great, and we can start again. I know some fresh faces tonight. Welcome back, and Be'ezer Hashem, we're looking forward to a starke Newsman after Bin Azmanim. Okay, fine, excellent.